Everybody's long haul experience is very different. March 13th, I was sick.
Mm-hmm.
Later in May, I knew something was up. It took me a long time to even accept that this was trauma. I mean, there's times where I just feel completely like a totally different person. I used to be very creative. I've made quilts. I've made mosaics. I mentioned the choreography. I used to be a really good photographer. I feel the impulse, but I have nowhere to start.
Welcome to The Human Experience. I'm Jennifer Peterkin, and this is episode 24, Maureen's Story. Before March of 2020, Maureen was a vibrant, dedicated career woman with some impressive accolades under her belt. She was working for a small nonprofit when COVID hit, and she was in the first wave of those afflicted by the virus. Since then, Maureen has been diagnosed with what's called long haul, an offshoot of COVID that many are not talking about, leaving the affected to advocate for themselves. It continues to be a debilitating and isolating journey more than 3 years later. Many of those living with long haul, including Maureen, suffer from invisible symptoms that may take years to heal, if at all, as doctors, researchers, and medical professionals continue to learn about the long-term effects of COVID. A trigger warning before we begin: there is a brief mention of suicide in this episode. Please proceed with care. So let's start with what your background is, because so much of your, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but so much of your identity was in your work because you were working in things that you were passionate about. So what was like a brief history of your career leading up to your last job, which we'll talk about, the Domestic Violence Center?
You know, in college, I was exposed to a lot of art and interested in more culture broadly. And as somebody raised very much in a stale, passionless and cultureless and, I don't know, ice-cold Republican suburbia on a 9-house cul-de-sac, I fled. I loved college. I loved living in a city. I knew that that was always for me. When I graduated, I found myself in college in a real unexpected arts environment that was not my major, that was sort of a part-time gig that ended up being a minor, that wasn't a talent as much as a passion, but turned out to reveal a lot of talents that weren't physical. I got a dance minor. I was a much better choreographer than I was a dancer. You'll find a lot of people who will still say so. We had a tremendous budget because I attended a very technical and practical university, so nobody really paid much attention to us and gave us a lot of money without noticing it. If I went in my dancers in silks, they wore silks.
Wow.
And we took the photos and produced the posters and thought of marketing and titled the concerts in a very detailed way. And when I got out of school, I had an opportunity to travel overseas. And so when I got out of school, I didn't want to lose either that cultural opportunity or that travel opportunity. I said, I'm used to being poor right now. Let's take this for another leg, another spin around the dance floor. I was able to work for a company that set up in-house fundraising and marketing campaigns, a lot of it via phone. But you'd work for maybe 6 months at a time in different cities all across the country. I didn't want to just travel and be somewhere in a hotel for a week or two.
Yeah.
This is what I wanted. And I lived in Toronto. I lived in Miami. I lived in San Francisco. I learned to bury a keg on the beach and to barbecue corn properly. And I had a round apartment in Miami. Toronto, man, a place where it's just this continuous snow thing, you know, how to not love your shoes as much. And anyway, it was a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And not easy.
Sure.
But that's where I learned a lot of the practical sides behind theaters and museums and children's theaters and ballet and dance companies that had a commitment to diversity. I mean, who was talking about diversity in 1989? Tell me. Who? That were also recreating works that were done in the 20s by the Russians, you know? So It was wonderful. I loved it. I came back. I used what I learned in more practical settings, but that also benefited more social issues. And then I started working within different theater companies, and I learned a lot through plays. I learned a lot through actors. I learned a lot through writers. I never clearly jumped out of the being poor thing. After a while, it got hard. Marketing is the redheaded stepchild of any theater company. You shouldn't have to sell it. People will just come in droves.
Yes.
And that's not it. And as a redheaded stepchild, I have to say that gets hard after a while. Yeah, I was the marketing director for Freedom Theater, the nation's oldest and largest African-American theater. I worked with the amazing Walter Dallas, but there's a lot that you've got to learn on the fly when you are marketing works written by Black actors, directed by Black actors, and starring some incredible Black actors, and where the audience is intended to be 80% people of color and 20% not. I don't know that we actually fulfilled Walter's vision for the repertory company, but we had financial challenges there too. And so I don't know that we really could complete what we wanted to do. So I've always been a sports fan, part of being the firstborn of two Irish Catholics who wanted a boy. And I thought, what's the difference between sports and theater? It's good seasons and bad seasons. It's changes in lineup. It's, bad press. It's same thing. So I took a perch for a major ticketing company, thinking that it would be a way into one of the sports franchises locally. And I learned a lot, stayed longer than I intended to. All red-hearted American boys really want to work in sports. And at the time, it wasn't too easy. But I learned what I needed to learn, got an opportunity to do some exciting things and find my own creativity and display it in my own way. That's where I got a chance to go to Greece when Ticketmaster was ticketing the Olympics. There was an employee challenge, to make it easier on the employees who certainly had to work a lot harder and put up with a lot more changes and challenges with different money denominations and language changes and a lot. They had this team challenge where you'd have different challenges each week. And eventually the team that wins gets to go to the Olympics for the games. Free hotel, free tickets, and the best part of it was that it didn't count as vacation time. There were people on our team who never planned to go to the games, never planned to fly to Greece. They just wanted the week off without it counting. But for a lot of us, it was a way to respond to work things creatively and push the envelope in terms of taste, in terms of decorum, all of it as far as we could go, because we knew we couldn't get fired for it because it was all technically off work hours.
Okay.
I loved that whole time, Team 59.
That's awesome. So where did you go from Ticketmaster?
Museum World.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, you are
the
all
National
over the place.
Constitution Center. Without a doubt, that was the best job I ever had.
Really?
Yeah. These were such committed people in a million different directions. The Constitution Center, people don't realize, is certainly not a history museum. Well, it is in the sense that this is how the Constitution has been challenged ever since the ink started to dry. I mean, yes, there is Signers Hall, where you see the images of the signers of the Constitution, but through everything, there are stories of many Americans whose lives really begged the question of what these words mean and how their own lives are affected by it. Everything from a woman who literally lost her citizenship by marrying a British man sometime in the 1800s, to Mickey Mouse, which was a copyright issue, to Ryan White, whose case had to go to the Supreme Court just for the right to go to school with HIV. So, my little political beating blue heart that had been there since, my father says, since the time I was born, that was a great job. And we still had a lot of fun there, too.
Yeah.
Really smart and funny and intrigued, and people who really loved a controversy and really loved to discuss things. I loved it there. And from there, I went to the Barnes, which, I learned about art. I learned about the area, about what we're willing to tolerate and not tolerate as neighbors, as cultivators, I guess, of important things. And this whole story of this unusual man who collected some of the best postmodern work and hung it in the strangest way with all this quirky crap on his walls and shoved stuff so close together and had rules about how many people were allowed to look at it after his death. And that pretty much broke my back, literally.
Okay. So Barnes was not your favorite.
Barnes was not my favorite. I started using a cane at the Barnes. Being a historical location, it wasn't quite accessible. There were a lot of stairs, a lot of running around there because it was a very antiquated place. And there were a lot of minor physical fix-its that were constantly needed. Because as this place was getting closer to closing, we also had to increase our spit and polish. If Barbra Streisand is going to come through, you want the place to look really good.
Sure.
I spent 45 minutes touring Barbra through the collections, by the way.
That's pretty cool.
She's a lovely lady. Even when she's asking for one of the paintings, a Modigliani that would look great in her dining room. And she was quite serious. By this time, we were joined with the head of the museum, but she was very serious. She wanted that. And Barbra did not bring her lovely husband, which I was quite disappointed about. And, those things are fun.
Sure. Yeah.
Sade came through. I don't know if you knew Sade, but Sade has a song called Maureen.
Okay.
And I remember people singing it to me. Well, it's very nice when Sade sings a song called Maureen to me. It was lovely.
That is lovely.
But yeah, by the end, I was using a cane, sometimes not even to deal with the stairs. I was damaged with a terrible migraine as the result of an injection procedure to try to fix my back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like a steroid injection?
It wasn't a steroid injection. It was something different, but they first had to find the right path to get to the pain, and that path had an ink. Are you sure you're not allergic to shellfish? No, I would eat oysters every day if I could. But I guess I can't really handle shellfish being injected right into my bloodstream.
Oh, wow.
And I have the same migraine to this day, more than 10 years later. So the health issues piled up.
And they really started when you were at the Barnes?
I remember having one chiropractic appointment when I was still at the Constitution Center, but things really grew at the Barnes. This back issue was something that I spent a long time after I had to leave the Barnes, and I couldn't necessarily, I wasn't about to spring right up and work somewhere again.
Yeah.
I needed some time to heal. And in this time, I looked into different doctors, trying to find somebody to fix it, to work with it, wasn't so easy. And in that time, about a year later, that's the first time a rheumatologist diagnosed me with fibromyalgia.
Okay. Where'd you go after the Barnes?
I didn't. Well,
You took a break.
I tried to strengthen my back, strengthen my health. So after considerable investigation into my health and how much better it could get, I eventually got a part-time job working for a friend who needed some help doing actually medical billing.
Oh.
Yeah, and some of it I could do from home. I could do it on my own hours. So if I had other doctor's appointments or things, it was very flexible.
Yeah.
And in that time, it allowed me to do PT and try to get stronger and try to really see where it was showing up in other parts of my body. And during this time is when I read a very interesting article by Michael Moore in the early summer of 2016 that said, "Wake up, people. Donald Trump is probably going to win this election, and it's really going to come down to Michigan, Pennsylvania, and I believe Florida was his other state to watch." And I started really thinking about it. Things were very much up in the air. I had experience running phone rooms. I had experience engaging people and certainly organizing volunteers. I had a lot to bring, even if I didn't have a lot of mobility. And I decided, if not me, then who? And I didn't want to have that feeling the day after the election. So I joined the Pennsylvania Democrats and tried to make a difference in the 2016 campaign. It was very different. I think I had 25 years at least on most of the people that I worked with.
Oh, wow.
It was a very dynamic time. We weren't just trying to get one Democrat elected in this state. We were trying to get the entire down ballot. So I learned a lot about what else was happening in a more aggressive way. I met fascinating people, not just on the same team as me, which I couldn't trade for gold. I learned about some of the most committed Democrats who also hunt and fish through the season, and how gun issues are really to be taken with a lot of different thought, that it's not just so quick and simple. You know, that there are Democrats out there who take the fall to fill their freezer. That's their part-time job, to feed their family, not just through the fall, the winter, but even part of spring. And that's what they're doing. And there is some kind of gun that allows them to do a lot of that. And just because you see a sign that's, you know, advertising a gun store, it doesn't mean that it's just an instrument for what happened in Uvalde. I met all kinds of people. I mean, I met book writers. I met ceramic artists. I met soldiers who are still fighting a battle.
Yeah.
I met incredible people. I would never give that up the way that I learned lessons in other places, like the way I did, you know, traveling around a country not knowing anybody, the way I learned how to barbecue that corn, or the lessons I learned at Freedom. You know, there's things you can't learn just by people telling you stuff.
Sure. No, those are priceless, and that's what it's about, your experiences, and that has shaped who you are. So after the campaign, you landed at the Domestic Violence Center.
I did.
That's where we met.
Yes. Thank God. You know, when Donald Trump won, I had genuine heartfelt concerns about small organizations that many of us really thought were just going to get sliced off. You know, if you were the United Way, if you were the American Heart Association, you know, American Red Cross, you were going to be fine. These tiny little organizations were going to lose their funding. I don't know why, but that was a lot of the worry at the time. Small arts organizations, small service organizations, they were all on the chopping block. The big would be fine, the small were all in danger. And so I specifically started looking for service organizations. I felt like women were ready to rally. It was a good time to engage and enliven a lot of these small, more isolated organizations. And that's why I thought there was real opportunity for me there.
So you sought that job out. What was just explain what you were doing there.
My position was to work specifically with individual giving, which was a remarkable challenge because donors don't necessarily want to think about the topic, or if they are giving, there's normally some connection or history that they may or may not, more often not, want to promote or even think about or remember. They're fine to write the check. Let's just keep it quiet. That left a lot of the stuff like fundraising.
Yeah.
Kind of trying to function on autopilot, which is a contradiction of terms.
Sure.
You still need letters approved. You still need concepts for end of year solicitations and your annual report and stuff signed off on. And those big concept stuff don't rank very important either when you're trying to make higher concept stuff like what's our responsibility to the transgender community, or immediate needs like a woman just came in through the front door with a broken nose and possibly a broken eye. Does she go to the hospital and leave her kids here? Or do the kids get dropped off at grandma's house while grandma doesn't know this location? Mm-hmm. I can't make those big decisions, but I know that we have a goal for this fiscal year. And if we don't hit the annual fund goal, when something like more than 70% of our individual giving comes off of that appeal outside of our gala, then it doesn't make me sleeping any better at night knowing that I didn't get a response
Sure.
for this piece of writing or this insert or what have you.
Right. It's high stakes.
It's high stakes, and you still have to put that in perspective of the woman's broken nose.
Yeah. The nature of the organization means that whatever your part in it, it's a high stress, high stakes position.
I've come to the belief, having been on other calls and seen other comments from other shelters of a number of different types, that places that are there to inherently serve chaos will stay in chaos. And again, this is not just from my own experiences there. It is from any kind of crisis center experience that others have shared with me.
Absolutely.
But just because that's the nature doesn't mean that I'm just going to sit back and relax and breathe and say, well, all I can do is wait.
No, not at all.
It means I'm going to bite my nails and hold my breath and stand on the precipice and agonize over every single second until I get it.
Yeah.
Not a great way to stay healthy.
That's another conversation, but that's a good segue because here we go. So you're working in this high stress, chaotic job. 2020 rolls around and here comes a global pandemic. And you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you got COVID very early on, like almost immediately.
I did.
So when did you get COVID?
March 13th, 2020. And I know this. It was Friday the 13th because our gala was 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
And March 10th was a Tuesday. We had a huge staff meeting. And the tail end of it, something about possible COVID, whatever had been brought up. And some people started off in the beginning like, oh, this is nothing. This is nothing. And then somebody had mentioned that her husband had just gotten back from Italy. And everybody screamed like, as if they were all going to run out the one door. The 11th was a Wednesday. Mm-hmm. Some of my volunteers from the gala committee had gone and met with the catering director where we're talking about this COVID thing.
Yeah.
And what can we do? I said, I cannot afford past hors d'oeuvres. Like, it's just not in the budget. So we'll just add longer tongs at the cheese display. That was our answer to get around COVID 2 weeks later. It's hysterical.
I mean,
who
knew? Who would have known?
Longer tongs at the cheese display. That was me right here pointing to Maureen O'Connell. Yeah, because I won't pay for past hors d'oeuvres. Yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, you got COVID immediately.
And then so Friday night, we're waiting. Everybody's quiet. And then at 10:05, I've already handed in my hours, already locked them into payroll. So it says that I'm leaving. Actually, it said that I'm leaving at 4 and it's 10:05 and I'm still waiting. Our CEO, she sent an email and it says that we are postponing the gala. And I ran right in when the door finally opened and I said, so we can't really just send out a generic email. We've got to at least send personal emails to the sponsors. So I'm kind of like, okay, what's our plan here? Like, what are we saying? What are the words? And I finished at about like 10 after 12 and I got in my car. It's too late to stop and get food. And of course I haven't eaten. And of course I have nothing in the house. And I'm like, wow, my throat hurts. I got this weird tickle in the back of my throat. And of course the 2-step cough, you haven't had COVID, so you don't know what I'm talking about. But it's like a little cough, cough, step, cough, cough, step. At least all of my round one people, that's how we all described it.
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. 2, pause. 2, pause. Not a big,
hacking. Yeah.
No, but my lungs were very well protected. And I was supposed to go to a dinner party the next night. And so I called my friend Kathy and I was like, look, I got a little throat thing going on. And she was like, please don't come.
Do not show up here.
And I pretty much slept all weekend.
Yeah.
And I went into my doctor's office the following Wednesday, I think.
They let you in?
It was the last day. Like, while I'm trying to talk to the PA, behind me, all I see is like secretaries packing boxes like the end of the world. And she said, you don't have a fever. You don't have it. I said, I haven't had a fever since 2nd grade. My baseline temp is never higher than 97. I've been going to this doctor since 1998. You can check my back records. And she's like, but if you do not have a fever, you do not have it. You have the flu. I'm sure you have the flu. You're just being paranoid. You have the flu. Here's some Tamiflu. Here's this. She gave me all the stuff. Sent me home. I still didn't feel well.
I mean, at this point, there wasn't testing or anything, right?
There was a very few number, but like it was sell your soul, sell your first and second firstborn, and you could get one.
Okay. So testing wasn't a thing really yet. How did you actually find out you had it? For sure.
Eventually, when the antibodies tests came out, my antibodies were so far off the charts that they made me quarantine again.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so at this point, I am 5 weeks
Wow.
that I had missed. And I got Maureen for it at work. You have put us all in jeopardy. You have risked our lives. And I
Why?
was like, no, I didn't. Even when they told me I had the flu, I still stayed home. I took all kinds of junk. I mean, I all of a sudden became like Vita Queen.
So you weren't going into the office?
Well, I stayed home for a little while, but I had to go in. And still, I didn't start realizing it till May that my throat always hurt. Some of my other symptoms didn't stay. But then by May, I kind of like hit a U-turn and I started getting worse.
So we're talking about this because you have what they're calling long COVID. So not everybody has this. And what I've learned from you, which you can talk about, is that most of the people that seem to have this are people that got it very early on when it was at its most powerful, for lack of a better word. And you got it in March of 2020. It's now almost fall of 2022 when we're recording this.
30 months.
And you are still having symptoms. You are still having to go to the doctor. You're not sure what exactly is wrong. You're having studies. I mean, talk about how you had that U-turn and you started to feel bad again, but the journey of even figuring out that you had long COVID and what that was.
In May, I knew both cognitively and endurance-wise that I wasn't getting better. My regular COVID symptoms were easing up. And I did not have a great COVID. I did not have a horrible COVID. I never had to go to the hospital. I had lung issues. I'm pretty sure I had very small blood clots on the left side of my lung. And I think I had a decent sized blood clot in my leg. But that was after I had taken a lot of time off. And once I started getting up and walking around, that's when I felt the blood clot. I went to a primary care. He said he didn't feel it. That was good enough for me. I was sick of paying all the money. You know, I was running broke. And my primary got wind of this. And he was like, you have to go right now to the emergency room. Well, we know what emergency rooms were looking like at that time. They were not going to stop everything to x-ray my possible blood clot in my right calf, just, you know, when everybody else was literally dying in the emergency room. And I was not going to pay $500 just for the flat walk into the emergency room.
Right.
And so, like, I'm having this argument with this primary, and he's like, if you're literally risking your life, I don't understand why you think I should care for you. Like, this is the kind of arguments that you're getting with doctors. I said, I've missed 5 weeks of work. I've spent almost $1,000. I don't know what more you want me to do.
Yeah.
And he said, I want you to survive. Like, this is the kind of argument we're having. And again, this is somebody that I've seen since 1998 because he knows about my heart condition. So, you know, I'm back at work trying to catch up on a lot of backlogged work. But I couldn't catch up for beans. I couldn't focus. I couldn't remember the names of reports. And then slowly I just feel the need to like put my head down. And I get through the day. You know, nobody was really meeting. Nobody was talking to each other. All the doors were closed. It's very strange. It's very hard to keep focus when you're that isolated and you're just trying to remember your groove. And it got worse. And my ability to focus got worse. And I continued to fall further and further behind. I couldn't even be upset about it. You know, it's like when you know you're going under.
Yeah.
My review was somewhere in there. One of the other things that really started to happen to me at that time was any filter I would normally have was completely eaten away by this virus. This virus sort of gets past its normal cog and wheel and really gets embedded, certainly at a vascular level. They're sure of that. Some people were saying at a cellular level, like it's really building into every cell that reproduces itself. Some people believe it's like it through your every nerve, which explains why everybody hurts everywhere. My lungs weren't affected. A lot of people just think this is purely a lung issue. But for me, I know that fibromyalgia was sort of like the gateway into my body. If I didn't have fibro, I don't know that I would have been as badly affected, but it has like trashed my brain. It's trashed my ability to filter. It's trashed my cognitive skills at a more basic level than my higher thought process. When I was moving, I have the best people in the world who helped me move because I couldn't do it physically or cognitively. Mm-hmm. And there were these two angels who came in to clean out my kitchen, but I wasn't allowed in there. And they brought out all the Tupperware, and my job was just to find the right lids for the bottoms. And if we couldn't find them, then they went, into recycling. Well, they dumped all this Tupperware on my table in the dining room, and I thought I was going to hyperventilate. I was terrified. I couldn't figure out how to begin this project at all. I stared at this stuff as if I was looking at quantum physics.
Wow.
I was terrified.
Yeah.
And then somebody came out like 6 minutes later. They said, "How you doing?" And I didn't burst into tears. And that's what's interesting, too. I cried once, like one good cry. But I don't cry since this happened.
Oh, so you cried before this happened?
Oh, I cried all the time.
Interesting.
I was one of those like Hallmark card criers.
Yeah.
Don't cry at all.
Wow.
Like can't. Like there are times where I know something is sad and I start to, like my face contorts up, nothing comes out. And then all of a sudden I stop, like an actor.
Like a bad actor.
Like a bad actor. Or like an actor that is like on set and you caught them. Yeah.
So you had
my review. Sorry.
review. No.
And I kind of, in my review, I just let everything that stood in my way or made me feel hampered in any way, let it all go. Mm-hmm. And, it's not like this was just a work thing. I also did the same thing on Christmas Eve in front of my family. So it's just gotten worse.
Was this your review or you gave a review?
My review. And I was supposed to do a self-review.
Like your performance review.
I reviewed myself and my manager had reviewed me, not they. And then shortly after that, it's supposed to be within like a day or so. Mm-hmm. But of course, it had been several weeks, more than that. We're supposed to take this to our CEO and just review it, talk about it, and any salary adjustment or any title adjustment or any responsibility adjustment should be addressed. And at that time, that's when I was let go.
Okay. So you were let go and you were still experiencing these symptoms.
And at this point, it wasn't just symptoms. Like, I think within 2 days of that, I went to a doctor and I had blood drawn. And to see the difference in my liver panel, my just different blood work that was drawn the previous November.
Yeah. So at this point, did you assign the term long COVID or did you think it was something else?
I had started hearing about people who weren't recovering. I think in September, I knew that University of Pennsylvania Hospital had a program for what they were calling long haulers. It wasn't called long COVID. It was called long haulers.
Okay.
And it was referencing truck drivers, literally. Like, this is like long hauling.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. In fact, somebody just the other day, they said, these patients are doing everything for this. They're doing it all themselves. They even had to name their own disease. And literally, the long haulers are sharing all their own information, their own symptoms, their own discoveries with vitamins. They're experimenting so much. They're doing so much of their own reading and then sharing it on one portal. They're sharing the worst of it. They're sharing the suicides. They're sharing all of it. There were people spending thousands of dollars, driving thousands of miles to go to all these doctors to be told, try this, try that, don't try this, don't try that. Now, remember, with my heart condition, about a third of medication I can't take because it will stimulate my heart. So that cut a lot of stuff that I couldn't take anyway, but it saved me a lot of miles. In fact, I stopped driving in October, just 2 months after I got fired, because I couldn't pay attention to everything that was happening on the road. And I knew it. I recognized it.
Yeah. But I think people assume that long haul is just an extension of COVID. And
Not a little bit.
It's not. So how would you describe it? I know that's a very broad question, but I kind of want to leave that open for interpretation.
Everybody's long haul experience is very different. It's very much like an a la carte menu or a salad bar. It's a salad bar. That's what it's like a really good salad bar. Or like the buffets that they have in the casinos or something.
There you go.
Yeah. A casino buffet would be your long haul experience. And a lot of people assume that it's all lung damage. And I'd say at least a third of us are not experiencing that. Although those of us without the lung experience, we can't do stairs. We're not doing stairs.
Yeah. So there is a lung component, but it's not primarily a lung issue.
It is primarily a lung issue for people who were in the hospital. For people who never made it into the hospital, we still struggle. And maybe that's because we've just spent so much time in bed and not moving.
Well, that's true too, yeah.
You know, where was I recently? About a couple of weeks ago, I was like, oh, stairs. I remember them because I've just worked so hard to avoid them.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a bad thing. Maybe I need to put stairs in my life. That doesn't mean suddenly going up an entire flight.
Sure.
Like maybe 3.
Yeah. You have to start somewhere. And you have to start small.
So I have a pool here outside of my apartment. And I was in the pool and I found these little tiny circles. So I put them on my heels and I used them almost as weights, but I had to push them down. Mm-hmm. Well, that was huge because it didn't hurt my joints, but I could feel my muscles working again. Mm-hmm. And it was good. I did the same thing with my arms. I did them in the front. I did them in the back. So if I could do that every day, that would be great. But to put on a bra is a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Much less to put on a bathing suit. And my day is still pretty full just pursuing how I'm going to stay in this apartment. Mm. You know, I sold my house. I've got to figure out how long that's going to get me. And just saying yes to every request, go get this MRI, go get this test done, go get this, you know, it's not going to last that long.
Right. You're the only person that I know personally that I know of that has long haul. And obviously I knew you before this as well. And so just hearing what your day-to-day life has been like and how drastically your life has changed. And I think that's what I want people to understand is this is completely debilitating. It changed your life. It's not a small thing that like, oh, I got sick and I was out of work for 5 weeks. It's been 30 months and you're a different person than you were 30 months ago.
I am really lucky in that while I have really bad cognitive issues and I have a lot of really bad physical issues, my cognitive issues are really just on the easy stuff. And they said that's pretty unusual. So there's a series of stuff that they will start asking you just for a quick assessment. They'll do the count backwards from 100 by sevens. I could do that. But then they would like throw out random letters and you had to just start naming every word you could think of that starts with that letter. So they would just say K or G. And there were sometimes they would throw out a letter and I couldn't think of a single word that started with that letter. Like the Tupperware. I didn't know where to begin at all. I sat there for 6 minutes staring at Tupperware and I thought I was going to vomit. Like I was so scared of it. And then somebody came back in and said, "Do you need help?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm surprised I didn't freak out." And she said, "Well, why don't you just start putting the circles on one side and the squares on the other?" And this was like the answer to the cosmos or something.
Right.
Just that one hint I never would have been able to come up with. And just to do that was so simple. But that breakthrough was everything. Mm-hmm. And it never would have come to me. I mean, there's times that I stare at my microwave. And of course, I've only been here for a year or so. I stare at the buttons on the microwave and I can read all the words, but they don't mean anything to me. I'm just utterly confused. But you want to sit down and have a long conversation about the student loan elimination, right, or about like my mother's health and what should happen with her house or something else like complex and involved. I can do that.
This interview.
Well, and I can't remember certain things.
So when did it move from just the physical symptoms to the cognitive stuff? Like, when did you notice?
I knew in May. I mean, that's soon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
March 13th.
So
I had
thought,
my first physical symptom. May,
yeah.
I knew something was going a little wrong.
Okay. So it wasn't just a resurgence of your prior symptoms. No. It was something completely different.
I mean, March 13th, I was sick. Mm-hmm. Later in May, I knew something was up. It wasn't just motivation. It wasn't just exhaustion.
Okay.
But the exhaustion was the only thing that I could say possibly maintained. And by exhaustion, I don't mean like I'm a little tireder by the end of the day. I mean, it hits you like a Mack truck. Mm-hmm. It's like a drug kicked in. Like I wake up in pain every day. Like before where I had back pain from the fibro, it is in every single joint in my body. The top knuckles of my fingers hurt sometimes more than anything else. More than my back. There's times that I look at my right wrist, which I actually did break in college when I was dancing. There's times where I look at it and I imagine the delight in cutting off my right hand.
Yeah.
I can't use my cane anymore because my wrists won't hold me up. Mm-hmm. I miss my cane. I can't use a walker because of my shoulders, my elbows, and my wrists.
Yeah. What good is leaning on something if it hurts?
Right.
And this is all symptomatic of long haul. Mm-hmm. This isn't anything like,
no,
oh, this happened to be happening on top of it. This is all a symptom of the long haul.
And whether that changes your cognitive issues or not still remains to be seen.
Yeah.
Because not enough people have really connected all these dots yet. And not enough people have exactly the same symptoms and mm-hmm. exactly the same treatment.
You joined a study, correct?
No, I joined a great long-haul COVID clinic, Penn.
Okay,
and then
a clinic, sorry.
I had great people who volunteered to help pack up and clean out and fix up my house so I could sell it, so that money was not my biggest worry. Mm-hmm. And I didn't follow through on all the treatments that Penn wanted me to do. I instead just focused on getting the house sold. And Penn wanted me to go to Penn X-ray places and Penn blood places and all that kind of stuff.
And you weren't driving? I
wasn't driving, and my primary and my cardiologist are mainline people. Okay. So I moved to a place directly across from a mainline hospital because Mainline Health opened a COVID clinic. And I will say proud, I will say strong, that Mainline's COVID clinic is not a program. It's a printout. It's the worst excuse for healthcare that I could possibly describe. It is an excuse to take grant money.
Wow.
The coordinators will tell you that your insurance doesn't cover something like OT or PT when it does. They're overwhelmed. They don't even want to be prepared for it. They're just set up so that you continue to use their own doctors and they collect the information. And I signed a lease. I moved in here to take advantage of this. It doesn't have to be highbrow. It doesn't have to be engraved in gold. I just want a little help.
Yeah.
I'm not getting it. So now I'm back to Penn. And so when I called to make that appointment, I think it was the end of June, my next appointment with the very wonderful Dr. Abramoff, who tried everything, and I wasn't making time for them. My appointment is in November.
Of this year.
For an assessment. That's on me. That's 100% on me. Because now everybody is hearing this and they're like, wow, I'm exhausted too. I must have long haul. I talked to an Uber driver who told me that, yeah, I had long haul. Yeah, I had that a couple of weeks ago. He said, yeah, I had long haul for about 3 months. It ended a couple of weeks ago. He had COVID about a year ago. If I'm having this much trouble describing what long haul is, mm-hmm. Can you imagine how a newspaper reporter, or worse yet, somebody like in the news on a 60-second bit is going to be able to describe it?
Right.
So no wonder people are confused. No wonder that Uber guy thought, you can have long haul like a little reprise,
right.
Like a little,
resurgence, and then it goes away, and yeah. And
right.
What it is, like just exhaustion or just some of your physical symptoms that you had when you were sick and not the cognitive stuff that goes along with it.
Right. Or the eye stuff. Mm-hmm. Like I have peripheral phantom visions that used to just be low. It was like, I used to think I'd see like a mouse, or something bigger than a mouse, like maybe a tiny dog, like a chihuahua, out of the corners of my eyes. And then I thought it was my glasses. So I went back to wearing another pair of older glasses. No, still seeing them. Well, then they started high. Like I thought I was seeing a bat or a bird. And apparently, yeah, this is very common among other people with cognitive issues. I have hearing loss in one ear. I have like a constant hum. They call it tinnitus. To me, it sounds more like a hiss, like when air is escaping from your tire.
Yeah.
And I am completely intolerant now of being in a restaurant where somebody else around me is on their speaker, on their phone. I can't stand that.
Is it the static of that
Not
bothers
the static, just the volume. Yeah, it's distractions of all kinds.
Okay.
I have a lot of trouble focusing. And I mean, I used to run a telemarketing room. I had to be able to hear somebody mispronouncing like Rachmaninoff in one corner, or somebody else is mispronouncing Dvorak on the other side.
Yeah.
You know, I loved a full phone room where I could hear everything going on. Now, if it's one thing and somebody is talking to me, I can't handle it. And that hit me immediately.
In March or in May?
No, like Mayish.
Okay.
May into June.
Gotcha. You had mentioned before that people that have long haul are sharing online their experiences and everything like that. Have you been able to find community in that?
Yes.
Reluctant, yes.
I'm a big fake. Being one of the early ones, I really thought this was going to be a short-term thing. I never, ever, ever would have imagined that I would still be here feeling this way. And I don't know how many other people in America have done this, but I never would have thought myself to do this. But I created a fake Gmail account and then a fake Facebook account because I was not ready to use my own Facebook account and say, I have cognitive impairment. I can't remember this or that. I can't remember words. You know, lately it's gotten to the point where I can't remember my debit card password that I've had since the early 90s. But I wasn't ready to throw any of that down on my Facebook page because I was thinking I was going to be looking for another job by, January.
Sure.
And people look stuff up.
I think that's a very valid and real concern.
Yeah. But I've never posted on my Facebook page. I've never gently kind of made this funny. I never really shared that I had COVID.
Yeah.
Because, of course, it happened on the very first day.
Right.
Everybody at work was treating this like we're not going to talk about it. And I was very much like, I had COVID. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
And when the second person got COVID, it was, don't talk about it. Don't you dare ask who had it. At that point, I didn't have a formal diagnosis.
Right.
It was April. And I thought, why are people being so HIPAA about this? This is kind of ridiculous. Why are you making this a big stigma issue? When if we do that, it's just going to kill more people.
Yeah. I mean, that is what happened, though, I think, to a degree. So
precisely.
You have your... now I can't think of words either. You have your identity on the internet.
Oh.
Have you been able to find community in any way, whatever that means to you? Has it been a comfort at all to have that? To even at least know that you're not the only person going through this, because most of the population isn't talking about it or isn't hearing about it.
Well, especially because my other community is tired of listening about it. I mean, my experience has been so debilitating. Inflammation is the biggest cause of my joint pain. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of things you can continue to try for that. But I am on this hideous anti-inflammatory diet that has to bend around foods that I know my own body is sensitive to and that could also cause inflammation. So the foods that I can eat are so narrow and not fun. And if you dare go out with me to a restaurant and have to sit through the 35 minutes that it takes me to order. Yeah.
It's just, listen, I've done it. It's fine. I just sit there and drink my wine.
Right.
And you take your time.
Right.
So
There's a lot of eyeball rolling, especially if
From
God
who?
forbid, from who I'm out with.
Oh.
Because God forbid the server know a little bit about this and sympathizes.
Yeah.
Because when I actually experience the sympathy, it's hard not to
Lean into that.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
Because I spend a lot of time on my own, a lot of time by myself.
I was just going to say, this is isolating more than anything else.
Hugely. And so my long haulers, we can be funny. We enjoy each other, but only as long as my thumb can put up with it, which isn't really that long.
Sure.
And there's a lot of people who are on there in new frustrations, or they're there about their kid or their husband or something else. Like they're not necessarily the long haulers themselves.
Okay.
There are people on there that are so far into the science that they're speaking a totally different language than me.
Sure.
There are people who are really on the brink mentally.
Yeah.
And, sometimes it's good to support them, but I don't know how much that's always good for me.
Right. I mean, you have a limited capacity right now as well.
Yeah.
So it's...
Well, and we're also getting to the point, I would say, of the long haulers, because there's literally a group of long haulers of people who were diagnosed before April 1st of 2020. And I'd say about 70% of them they're healthy, they're back, they're better. They're saying goodbye. Peace out.
They're healthy.
They're fine. They've made it. And they're saying that this was the best group and that they couldn't have done it without everybody, but they've made it through. And then there's the other 30, maybe 20. I don't know. I've read different percentages that are kind of left behind.
Yeah.
And I got to say that that's much worse than the people saying, I'm on the edge of the rock, I'm ready to jump.
Sure.
I'd much rather read I'm on the edge of the rock.
Than be left behind.
Yeah. Because I'm nowhere close. I'm waiting for my appointment in November.
Yeah.
You could literally spend 3 hours just updating yourself on this.
Sure.
And
Easy.
after 2 hours, I hit that wall again and I need to go back to sleep.
Well, I think too, how do you not keep searching, right? This is your life. How do you not look for the next opportunity and the next opportunity and the next remedy or whatever that's going to be? Why would you stop yourself? Other than the fact that it's probably not great for your mental health.
It's not great for my mental health, but at the end of these rabbit holes are much more information that is waiting in my primary doctor's office. Maybe not necessarily in November at, the Penn Clinic, but
Right.
A lot of these people are like, all right, I'm going to the Cleveland Clinic. I've lined up 5 appointments on this day and 3 the next day. And then I'm flying out back to, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
This is what people are doing. I've never seen such a bold, take the bull by the horns demonstration and move it all forward and let the doctors just glean the information from it. And we're just at 30 months.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you feel like you have to do something, right? Because you have to hold on to hope in whatever way you can find it.
Yeah. So this is my 3rd primary now. I mean, I had my long-term primary care physician. I mean, they don't know much about long haul, and I don't expect them to. I jumped to somebody else who was closer here. Because even if they don't know much about long haul, they still have to be the little referee with the referrals and everything else. So you're still going to need to see them. You're still going to need to, play nice. I signed up for another one very close by. And when I went in and I had my list of all of my issues and all the stuff, and long haul was in there, they'd never heard of it. The woman who came in to take my blood pressure, she had never heard of it. And this was this year. This was the spring. So we're in 2022, and this was a nurse who was checking, and she started writing out my symptoms, and she stopped after a while. She was like, let me get the doctor in here. She couldn't handle them.
Yeah.
He comes in, and he stops me after a while, and he was like, we're just really here. Like, if you have high blood pressure, we can help you. If you have diabetes, we can help you. I said, I understand that. I understand this is an unusual thing, that people are still learning about this, and that I will need specialists, and that you basically will write referrals and stuff like that and be kept informed. But I still need a primary. And he's like, well, looking at this, it's probably the medication. It's pretty much the medication
that's causing everything.
Yeah. And I'm like, so you're not taking this? He's like, no, we just really don't deal with that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. So I went out there and I was like, so you expect me to pay for this appointment now? This is how it went. This poor woman behind the desk. I mean, she couldn't have been any lovelier. But I let her have it. Well,
it's already frustrating and discouraging to have to keep repeating and explaining, but then to be stopped by a medical professional and told, sorry, this is too much for me. I can't handle this.
And by the way, honey, it's because you're taking too much even though I don't know what's going on with you, it's probably because you're taking too much medication.
Right. I haven't finished listening to you, but I can diagnose you and tell you.
I kind of know what's going on. Can you imagine somebody genuinely with long haul?
Yeah.
I ordered flowers on the day of settlement for my two closest friends who really just got me out of that place and sent them. And I'm talking to this woman and I'm trying to explain just a little bit. And she is like, you have what? She didn't heard it. And I said, well, this and that. I had COVID and then I have all these weird symptoms like this and that. She's completely silent. Turns out that she's a long hauler. She had no idea. She's trying to run this business the best that she can. She's the owner of her own thriving business. My father he got all of his flowers from her. Flowers by Michelle on Westchester Pike. But she has been working her butt off. Sick as a dog. Goes home and just dies. She has, I think, her daughter helping her try to run this stuff. And so, of course, then I'm like, all right, this is what you need to know.
Yeah.
You got to get on this Facebook group. You got to do this. Stay away from mainline health COVID clinic. Call Penn.
But what a relief, in a sense. I mean, it's horrible that it took you calling to order flowers for her to know. But she had to feel relief from that. Like, I'm not crazy. This long haul and the doctors, whether intentionally or not, are gaslighting people into thinking that nothing is wrong with them or that something completely different is wrong with them. And you're like, I know what my body is going through and it's horrible and traumatizing, but you're sitting there and telling me that it's all in my head.
My heart breaks for the people out there who are being told that from doctors, but I also know what it's like to have that constantly reinforced by people around them every day.
Sure. And not all doctors are doing that. I can only imagine. It doesn't have to
be doctors for it to really knock you down.
No, I just want to say the things that the medical field has seen over the past couple of years are horrifying. And it's amazing that anybody is still choosing to get up and go to work there every day. So I don't want this to be a bashing of medical professionals. But it's really hard when you're going through something and you know you're feeling something and they're exhausted, they're tired, they're at the end of their rope, and they're like, I don't know, look, I don't know.
And what's also really interesting is that the information that even long haulers have that aren't on Facebook. There's somebody that I know who is less interested in social media.
Yeah.
And so she reads a lot. That's what she says. She reads a lot. But what she's reading is stuff that's kind of published more from the medical side, the academia side, and not by the actual long haulers themselves. So it's not happening quite as immediately, as quickly. And so the perspective that she has, the information that she has, where she'll normally go to, the jump to, is completely different than where I jump to, because I'm reading stuff that's really happening sort of immediately.
It makes sense. It's going to be so, I don't want to say this actually.
Go ahead.
It's going to be so long until they
that.
have an understanding of what's happening. I know you know that, but I don't want to reinforce that.
No.
But the global pandemic was a form of community trauma. And now you're going through this other separate trauma of dealing with a debilitating, semi-permanent change of your entire life. How do you deal with that on a day-to-day basis?
That's really interesting because it took me a long time to even accept that this was trauma. The one thing that was rolled out was sort of like an 8 weeks of group therapy, and it didn't do much. But I asked a question like, if talk therapy isn't your jam, what would be the best thing to make some progress, especially if you're kind of in this weird place of depersonalization, derationalization stage where your brain has clearly moved off its rails. You know, I call it Maureen Hernandez. So there's like Maureen O'Connell, and then there's like the Aaron Hernandez version, because, you know, there are people who have compared the CTE football concussion stuff with this brain stuff. I don't know whether all of the brain stuff with long haul is the same, but I mean, there's times where I just feel completely like a totally different person. I used to be very creative. I've made quilts. I've made mosaics. I mentioned the choreography. I used to be a really good photographer. I feel the impulse, but I have nowhere to start. And part of that is just living in pain every day. And it's real pain. It's serious pain. And not feeling like me is weird. But we were talking about what kind of therapies would work. And somebody who knew the field, knew this, knew the hospital system, like really knew everything. He said, you need trauma-informed cognitive behavioral therapy. You need CBT. But I was like, well, even without the trauma? And then some people were like, okay, we're going to have to take this really slow for all of them. And they were like, okay, well, and then they started with like, so there's micro traumas. And then they asked a few more questions. And we went through the whole thing about like, there was getting COVID and then not knowing that I had COVID and then getting fired and selling this house that I'd lived in for 20 years that I had owned. Like really packing and unpacking all of that has been a challenge. And the truth is, I've been in physical pain since at least 2012. And there's so many maps that show sort of this autoimmune stuff, how this is all connected and how a virus can kind of wiggle through different things.
Yeah. So you had some trauma to deal with.
Some trauma.
So what do you do moving forward in terms of trying to come to terms with the trauma?
Oh my God, I haven't even started on that.
Okay, that's fair. You're still in survival mode. That's fair.
I mean, I've got so many things to deal with right now.
Yeah.
There's the medical, and then there's putting in line, what's my financial house going to look like? And then physically, where am I going to live? Because I cannot just pack this place up in a month's time and move.
Right.
It's going to take me 6 months. And I don't even know where I should be living. I don't know if I'm going to be able to drive again. Should I be living? Who or where is the best place for me to live?
Right.
I can't answer any of those questions.
Yeah, so you have a lot that is on your mind constantly, and you can't get your doctor's appointment until November. So
it gives me more time to think about it and not soon enough to start answering or even know which question to answer first.
Absolutely. One of the most frustrating things with this, I imagine, is how slow everything has to move because of, you know, bureaucracy and appointments and all of that fun stuff.
There's also the bureaucracy on the end of the government. There's a lot of people who also have long haul that have reached out, and the government has passed bills specifically to help long haul. And the money has passed, but nobody's figured out what to do with it. So the American Rescue Plan Act was specifically for people affected by COVID. And I don't know if you have kept your ear close enough to the ground, especially after Uvalde, but there were a lot of people saying, oh, there's all this money left over from the American Rescue Plan Act. It's not left over. You just didn't really give us ways to spend it. There was supposed to be some way that people who were behind on their real estate taxes, for example, could get that covered. You know, that was passed March 11th, 2021. I was behind on my real estate taxes, and real estate taxes are not cheap. And my real estate taxes were not part of my mortgage. Actually, I'd paid off my mortgage by the time I sold my house. So I sold my house in July of 21. They didn't publish the application, the device to actually get to that money until February of 2022.
Oh my.
Almost a year later. So all of that money, whether you needed it for electric bills or your mortgage or your real estate bills, it took a year before they even created the device to have access to it. And that's just one part of it.
Wow.
Yeah. And then there's one thing you shouldn't do when you have long COVID and it's affecting your brain. You should not do your own taxes, because as much as you think that you've finished every step, there's always something you leave out. But I used
Maureen.
Tax Act.
Yeah.
And I did all of it and stuff like that. And I printed it out. And you know what it says at the bottom of the page you print out? Now click something or something I didn't do. So I didn't submit
file them.
19. I did them.
Mm-hmm.
I printed them, but I didn't submit them. 2020's taxes were in the middle of the move. I filed the extension, but do you honestly think I could manage anything at all when I was only working half the year? I applied for unemployment, but unemployment couldn't figure out whether I was entitled to unemployment until the very last week of when I should have gotten them. So I got all of the money in the very last week. So I got two things in the mail in 2021. It said, you have exhausted all of your weeks for unemployment. And the second letter said, we have reviewed your claim and decided that you are entitled to all of the money. And I was like, well, where is it? And then I checked on my little card and it was all in there. So I didn't know if any of the unemployment money had actually been credited to 2020 or not. Oh my God, I couldn't figure out doing those taxes on a good day without the brain problems.
Right.
So yeah, extension.
Yeah.
I can't figure out my microwave. You think I'm going to be able to figure out those taxes?
Cook time timer. What's happening? Yeah, God, it's too much.
So of all of those stimulus checks that everybody else got, I only got one. I only got the first one because I didn't file my taxes because I didn't call H&R Block.
Oh, God.
It's good when I can be funny. I mean, if
You
I know
are
I'm
funny.
not creative, well, for a while I wasn't funny either.
Yeah.
It's this shit-kicking wine I'm drinking here. Do you want to try it?
No. Okay, thanks. So
I'm glad that got recorded. No, I really don't. I don't want to live any part of your life.
I love you, but no.
I want to try the sawdust kind of little lemon poppy seed things you have to eat for breakfast either. I think the dairy is a much bigger good elimination. I think chicken is a big issue, and I think the dairy
Interesting.
is a big thing. And I'm getting really used to the non-dairy dairy.
Oh, good. That's good.
I would be much happier eliminating dairy than I am eliminating gluten.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a toss-up for me. I mean, I did go vegan for a while, so I didn't do dairy, but I didn't give up gluten.
Did you try any of the substitute dairy?
Mm-hmm. I did. My thoughts on it are some of it is way better than others.
But you got to keep looking.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Some of it I really did enjoy, but some of it was terrible, as with most things. But the other thing is, if you're not eating dairy, substitute dairy tastes great. It's only when you are comparing them one to one. Like if you eat a piece of cheese.
You're right. Shut up.
Substitute dairy is great. So I have 3 questions left for you. 2 of them kind of go together. What is something you would want the general public to know about long COVID? And what is something you wish medical professionals knew about long COVID or were doing about long COVID?
I certainly wish that medical professionals would have somebody in their office, especially their PAs or even their nurses, somebody in their office. One nurse should be paid to jump on these Facebook pages and listening and following, especially They don't have to listen to the ones where it's just emotions. You can easily skip over this stuff. But the wealth of information, the wealth of science that's being shared, the wealth of suggestions, failed things and successful things and attempts is so worth somebody's time. It amazes me. And I just can't believe how simple that would be. It is not a private issue. That's why everybody's on there sharing this stuff.
Yeah.
I kind of shake my head and I'm like, why not? Journalists or journal writers are not doing this, that somebody is not following here right at the source. Especially, I can understand the impracticality of, CNN or people who are not consistently doing that. But like the medical journals should be following it because the lack of education. And I know that a lot of the funding, because Senator Tim Kaine has long haul. And Ayanna Pressley presented a recent separate bill that was specific to long haul. And it was much more about education than getting money to people who can't work. But the fact that at least some education isn't just sucking off of our own experiences like this, because it's right there. We're all spilling it. It's not like there's 12 different sites like this to take from.
Or like there's a secret
Yeah,
passcode.
not at all.
Yeah.
Or that you have to show your, date of...
Right.
Which is funny because some of the long haul COVID clinics are now saying you have to be able to show that you had COVID early enough, like that this is long haul.
So does your antibodies test count?
My antibodies test count.
Okay.
And Penn still, I've got several approvals or diagnoses.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what's something you wish the general public knew or was aware of about long haul, or even just how to approach people that have long haul?
That it's certainly not a situation of mind over matter. That if I try to just put my best mind forward and have a great day and keep up with you, that it could not only cost me a week in bed, it could cost me more than that. It could cost me an organ. Literally, my liver. And my liver was fine in November of 2019. My liver panels in August, they were way off. This virus hits all kinds of stuff. And it's not like I'm going to walk around saying, oh, my liver hurts.
Right.
I have horrible GI issues that I thought were more like nerves or something I ate that is suddenly now bothering me. Yes, my joints hurt, but these are just a few things. And sleeping in bed is not because I'm depressed, even though that's how it could very easily look. There was a woman who was recently diagnosed with narcolepsy, a woman on the site, and she was all excited. And I was like, that would be so hard for me to distinguish. What's the difference between long COVID and narcolepsy? And I knew somebody with narcolepsy, somebody who used to work somewhere where I worked. And he would literally just suddenly doze off. Granted, my ex-husband used to be able to do that all the time. He could sleep through rain, on his face. I couldn't believe it. Honest to God. Whereas I would wake up when a bug would lick the sugar coating off of an Advil. That's how light of a sleeper I am. It was true. It was true. Every night I would hear this little scratch, scratch.
Oh, my word. It was such a specific reference.
Yeah. Who's shocked that we got divorced? But she's excited. I'm like, that to me just sounds like long haul.
Right.
That sudden exhaustion that just hits you.
Yeah, I can only imagine because I struggle with fibromyalgia. So it's autoimmune. Nobody can see it. I look fine, healthy, whatever. And I am not comparing our experiences at all. I just say that to say there are times when I'll be in excruciating pain and I'm in a bad cycle. And nobody would be able to understand that because they can't see it. They can't see the physical pain that I'm feeling because it's not like bruises appear where my body hurts or where my joints hurt. So on that tiny scale, and then multiply it to the extent that you're feeling that every day, and everybody with long haul is feeling that, that has to be just such a frustrating and discouraging journey to walk through.
Yeah. I asked them to start praying for me at church. And then I started going like a couple of times. But now I'm not driving, so I would take an Uber. And so what do you have time for in the back of an Uber but putting on makeup? I don't think, like before I lived 2 blocks away from church. Never had makeup on. So I'd walk in and they're like, oh my God, you look fantastic. You must be feeling so much better.
Oh no.
I'm like, I just wish I could die right now. Give me a chair.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Yeah, you don't know what somebody else is going through.
So people can be really, they can make a lot of decisions in their mind.
Sure. I mean,
grocery shopping
feel that, yeah.
is always bad. I mean, for years with the car, I'd go grocery shopping. I'd start crying sometime between bagging the stuff up or driving back or just sitting in the front of the house like, I can't get this stuff back in the house.
Yeah.
I can't. And then I would just take in the cold stuff. And sometimes it would take me 3 days to really get all the stuff in the house.
Wow.
And now I live like right next door to a supermarket. And you would think this is the easiest thing in the world. And it's not. It's absolutely terrible. I have 2 perfectly sized bags. And if I dare fill them up, I will like at least one day in bed, maybe the next day. But, you know, yes, there's invisible diseases out there everywhere. What I want people to know about long haul is that it's not just about the breathing, that this is like a salad bar. Everybody has a different combination. There was a guy in England that we were talking with for a long time who had 72 symptoms. He was in really bad shape. I hope he's still with us. I really doubt it. But there is no way mental willpower is going to help us an inch. And if we even try that, like I did with the house, it'll just set us much further back.
Sure.
And, you know, do a little research before you judge, before you roll your eyes. It's fine if you can't handle it, but don't think you understand it.
Because you're not the one living it.
I've heard some horrible things this year. Horrible things. Horrible things. From people who are not just not understanding it, but aren't even trying.
Yeah.
And it amazes me that people are not even trying. I guess they figure I'll tell them. Well, I'm not going to tell them if they're not asking. And I'm certainly not going to tell them with the judgment they're already slinging at me.
Right. Why would you waste your time?
Right.
No, I don't blame you. Well, the last question I want to ask you is what I ask to everybody through the lens of this experience, going through what you have with COVID and everything. How has it changed your view of compassion?
Ooh, I honestly have to say that I was more compassionate before COVID. I mean, right now, it's just so self-absorbing and it's a harder think. I don't know that it's just COVID though, you know?
Sure. So with everything that you've been through, what does compassion even mean to you?
Oh, compassion is just being in touch with that part that acknowledges that there's a tiny touch of God that is put inside of everyone. There was a tiny part of God that was put inside Charles Manson. There was a tiny part of God that was put inside of Hitler. What happened to it? Was it cultivated? Was it protected? Was it stroked? Was it watered? Was it nurtured?
Oh, wow. I do want to thank you for being so open and vulnerable about this, because it's not easy and it's what you're living through every day. So yeah, I just really want to thank you for agreeing to be on here and be interviewed and talk about yourself.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you so much for listening to The Human Experience. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, share it with others, and leave a rating and review on your favorite platform. Everyone has a story, and I'd love to hear yours, so be sure to check out the show notes for more information about how to stay in touch. Do good and take care.